Hey, Nines. Welcome back to Semester 2 Humanities. While it's not ideal that we begin this unit remotely, I trust that you were able to pick up some really good skills last time around that are going to help you achieve some success over the next 6 weeks, hopefully. Humanities in Semester 2 is a lot of fun. We begin by looking at history. We start looking at by looking at the Industrial Revolution. We then move into the rights and freedoms of Indigenous Australians upon British settlement, and then we look at how our national identity was formed. Um, After that, we move into civics and politics, and we look at how our government bodies are elected and work to serve the interests of their voters. So, the term outline for the Industrial Revolution, will start on this slide looking at historical concepts. Sorry, on this PowerPoint by looking at historical concepts. We look at what led to the Industrial Revolution. We look at the technology that was created during the Industrial Revolution that changed the world. We look at how the Industrial Revolution contributed to the movement of people. We look at life during the Industrial Revolution. We look at the impact on children and women and men, for that part. And then we look at new ideas and foundations that came out of the Industrial Revolution. So that's what term 1 will look like, or term 3 will look like. So we'll start this unit by looking back at the 7 historical concepts. None of these concepts should be. So perspectives, the concept of perspectives refers to the point of view of which that part of history is explained or retold. So most people will have a different point of view, and the same can be said for historians on how different historical events occurred. It's really concept of evidence is information gathered from historical sources. So the concept of evidence is an essential part of history, of historical inquiry. We need contestability. Historians recognize that over time, the concept of empathy helps us to understand the impact of past events on particular individuals or groups. And that can include appreciating the circumstances that they may have faced, or I guess the motivations and rationale behind some of the decisions that they make. So, put it really simply, empathy is just an ability to walk in someone else's shoes, to be aware of and really sensitive to their feelings, their thoughts, and their experiences. In a historical sense, it's also looking at those who have walked before us. Why would someone have done something that they did almost 100 years ago, which can be really hard to do when society has changed so quickly and so much of it since. So during the Industrial Revolution, for instance, if we were to use the idea of empathy, we could look at workers and people in the workforce. So workers had very little rights. They worked really long hours in horrible conditions. Women and children were exploited and either suffered really horrific injuries or they died due to the new technology that was being made. Looking back and reflecting on the rights that we have today, particularly in the workforce, we can try to empathise and show sympathy to those who did not have those same luxuries, over 100 years ago. The concept of cause and effect is used by historians to identify chains of events and developments. So, both in the short term and in the long term, cause and effect aims to identify and examine the reasons why an event has occurred and what kind of consequence or outcome was a result of that event. So, I guess it's the why and what of history. So one key invention during the Industrial Revolution, for example, and you can see on the screen in front of you, was the steam engine, which was able to use the energy of heat and steam to provide power on a mass scale. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, this type of engine did not exist. So when it was created, it became the driving force pretty much behind power trains, ships, large ships, factories that we see in our societies today, and for the very first time, mass production. So prior to the creation of the steam engine, those things didn't exist. Basically, without the invention of the steam engine, the Industrial Revolution would not have occurred, and society as we know it today would not exist. So that's a really good example of cause and effect, the creation of the steam engine and the factory. And then we come to the concept of significance, which relates to the importance that we assign a particular aspect of the past. So, why do we study the Industrial Revolution, or why are we going to study the Industrial Revolution? We need to ask that question to ourselves. We need to ask what important people existed during the Industrial Revolution, what were the important events that occurred during the Industrial Revolution, what developments occurred, discoveries, movements, and what are the historical sites that we're all looking to. History, when we study it, is full of so many really important events and really significant people and places and things that we couldn't study everything. So instead, we need to make a judgment about what is worthy of study, so that we really nail down why, or the key aspects of the Industrial Revolution and how it's impacted us today. So, in order to determine if a person, event, or movement is historically significant, we need to ask some questions. And those questions might include how important was it to the people who lived at the time? How many people were affected by it? To what degree are people's lives still affected by what happened in the past? How long lasting were those effects? And whether or not those effects can still be felt today. So these are some important questions that we might ask to try and determine whether or not something is significant. So that was a really quick snapshot of the 7 historical concepts. Your job for this week is to select one of those historical concepts and to create a digital poster that you can create a digital poster on. So you can use Canva or PowerPoint or Word. I don't really mind what you use, as long as we're able to print it out and display it in our classroom when we return to school. So you need to pick perspectives, evidence, contestability, continuity and change, empathy, cause and effect, or significance, just one of those, and create a detailed poster. On your OneNote, I'll put some resources for you. The best resource that we have for this task is the textbook, and I'll put the chapter which details all of the information on that concept. That's your one task for this week. If you have any questions, I'll be available or your teacher will be available to you during your class time. Great. Thanks, guys.